Hello, it's Amy, and I'm back once again with another reading from the Journal of Emily Shore. This is a diary of a teenage girl written in the 1830s, published for the first time in 1891. And we have reached the spring of 1835. We were beginning the entries for May today. So the first entry for May is the 9th of May, which is a Saturday. This being a beautiful morning, Mamma and I took a delightful walk through Whitewood at 8 o'clock. The nightingales sung most sweetly. I think there were 4 of them. We watched one for a long time, which was perched in a naked oak very near us. He sat very calmly singing without hopping or dancing about. We noticed that he makes his long tweet, designated by Coleridge, one low piping note more sweet than all, without opening his beak at all, merely swelling his throat. Last night I heard 3 nightingales from my bedroom window singing together, one in Whitewood, one in the fir plantation, one near the Greens farm. 3 also were singing in the west side of the house, so that we have 6 nightingales within earshot every night. The whole wood was echoing with songs. We heard the nightingale, cuckoo, blackcap, thrush, blackbird, willow wren, golden wren, blue tit, coal tit, tree lark, chaffinch, robin, wren, and hedge sparrow. May 12, Tuesday. I saw the interesting sight of a young bird fed by its parents. An old male blackbird and a young one descended on the lawn just before the drawing-room windows. The old one began immediately to hunt for insects, the young one standing by quietly, continually opening his beak and making a little plaintive cry. At length, the old one brought out a large cockchafer grub, the sight of which much delighted the young bird. The parents put it into the child's mouth, but it was tossed backwards and forwards 2 or 3 times before the young one finally gobbled it up. They then flew away together. About half an hour after, I saw from my room another male blackbird with 2 young ones, for whom he was seeking food, and they watching his movements with the same impatient cry. I did not see the old one actually put the food in their mouths, but I was much surprised when he 2 or 3 times sang, though on the ground, I suppose to amuse the youngsters. On neither of these occasions did I see the hen. The young ones had a downy brown plumage, softer in tint than the hen's. Their beaks were encircled by a pale yellow skin. They squatted in a very droll manner. My usual walk now is to go through the lanes in Everton, descend the Tempsford Hill near the Tree Lark, rescend it, and return along the heath and through the wood. In passing the heath, I go rather out of the way, through a very pretty part, enclosed by a high hedge. It is quite covered with gorse in full flower. Here I generally sit down for some time on the gorse, under the high gorse bushes, telling stories to such of the children as are with me, according to my old practice, while I still continue. All round us, stone chats are flitting from twig to twig, making their clicking noise. Ox eyes are chirping, blackcaps and willow wren singing, all which, added to the delicious scent of the gorse and the perfect retirement of the place, make it quite delightful. May 20. I am actually writing this part of my journal in London. Last year, when Arthur Malkin and his wife visited us, they planned an expedition to London for Mamma and me, who were to come and stay with them in their house in Welbeck Street. This day the plan was put in execution. We left Woodbury at 10 o'clock, being driven in the phaeton to Biggleswade, and thence proceeded by chaise to London, where we arrived at about 5:30. It is a great delight to me to come to London. The only time I ever saw London was in 1831, when we spent a night there on our way to the sea. For many miles before we arrived, the atmosphere was polluted with the smoke of the town and the vile smell of brick-making. But over the town itself hung a dense cloud of smoke and fog, which totally hid all but the nearest buildings. No view of it from a distance could be obtained, and there was no beauty in the surrounding country to set it off to advantage. The region for some miles round it, neither country nor town. It consists of flat fields with a few trees, thickly interspersed with those hideous creations, citizens' boxes. In short, nothing can be less beautiful, less imposing, less interesting than the first sight of London, at least from the North Road. We avoided the city altogether, going by the new road through Regent's Park. I was altogether disappointed in the park. I had expected at least to see fine timber. No such thing. The horrid atmosphere of London checks all vegetation. As far as I could see, there was not a tree in Regent's Park to compare with the greater part of those in Whitewood. Besides, the sky is smoky and dingy. There is no freshness in the air, nor the bloom of spring everywhere as in the country. It is also a formal look. It is insected with wide public roads, which are enclosed by hedges or railings. These roads were full of carriages, cabs, horsemen, and pedestrians, which are supposed to give so much liveliness to the scene. So they do, but I like a retired, unfrequented park much better. On leaving Regent's Park, we entered Portland Place. Here I was much struck with the grandeur of the building, surpassing anything I ever saw in the shape of private houses. If London had all been like this, it would have been a magnificent city. But I believe not many parts are as noble as this. May 21, Thursday. Though not in bed last night till 10 o'clock, nor asleep till about 11, I woke this morning at 5:30, and would have got up, but Mamma kept me in bed till nearly 6. I was surprised to see the sky blue and the sun shining. In short, the air, at least above the houses, did not look less clear than out of London. Of course, it must be infinitely dingier than this in winter, when there are so many more fires, and in the city too, I suppose it is worse. This evening we had a most pleasant little party, or at least at tea, for all our visitors did not come to dinner. The conversation at tea turned partly on the zoological gardens, partly also on the horrid habit of smoking, which everybody save Mr. Kemble abhorred. And then we have a note here. 7 pages are filled with the account of a visit to the zoological garden. And that is not included in this edited version of the journal. In conclusion, I shall put down the opinions of 2 ladies of my acquaintance about the probable effect of seeing the zoological garden. I think, says Mrs. Arthur Malkin, that the most stupid person, the most indifferent to natural history, must be interested and pleased with the animals of the zoological gardens. I am sure, says Miss, and we're missing the name here, it's just a line, says Miss, a visit to the zoological gardens is enough to cure anyone of natural history. The smell is so horrible, false, and it is so hot and fatiguing. May 24, Sunday. In the afternoon we went to Vere Street Chapel. Here we had in the pulpit the most disgusting specimen of affectation, far beyond the reach of exaggeration and caricature. The preacher was a very young man whose name we could not discover. His manner was such that it would not have been surprising if the whole congregation had burst into a laugh. He bowed, shook his head, sailed back and forth and forward, sank, rose, held one hand on his heart, and stretched the other over the congregation, or clasped them together, waved his handkerchief, closed his eyes, smiled sweetly, shook his voice, assumed a ludicrous sentimental tone, even when quoting a text, jogged his sermon up and down, leant over his cushion, grinned, sighed, in short, did everything that he possibly could to make himself offensive and ridiculous. I never saw such a preposterous display in all my life, and Mrs. Malkin assured me it was very uncommon even in London. And I'm laughing at that because, you can see as I'm sitting here, I'm just imagining all these, hand gestures. And I've sat through enough sermons in my life to more or less imagine exactly what was going on here. Someone who takes the theatrics of giving a sermon to absurd extremes. May 25th, Monday. In London, all people go about 3 o'clock to make their morning calls. The consequence is that everybody is out at the same time, and it rarely happens that anybody is found at home, which the visitor knows very well. If by any rare chance they are at home and wish not to be disturbed by visitors, they very coolly desire the servant to say, not at home, a detestable practice, for though its meaning is well understood by the visitor, it is not so by the servant, who is thus taught to lie. Besides, why not say they are engaged, which would be just as useful and more honest? I think much better of London now than when we first came, which was in very gloomy weather, and I admire many parts exceedingly, but still I am horrified at the mischief done by the smoke. Almost all the houses are blackened, the yards and back premises are covered with soot. The trunks of all the trees are black, all plants become dingy, clothes get tarnished by the smoke, and hands can hardly be kept clean, and in some winds great puffs of smoke enter the open windows. The extreme blackness and dinginess of the sparrows, which are numerous, is also worthy of note. I see jackdaws sometimes, they cannot be made blacker, but doubtless lose all their gloss, and I suppose their grey polls are darkened. May 26, Tuesday. The concert began with a very fine symphony, which lasted a considerable time. Then came a duet between Rubini and Lablache, and then Miss Clara Novello came forward and sang a little English song, Meriton and Yeratilda. Miss Novello seems to be about 19 years old, dark and extremely pale, as all the others were owing to the late hours they keep. She was simply dressed and wore a bonnet and a boa, which the audience were suffering from the great heat. She has an exceedingly sweet voice, but Mrs. A.M. says she wants skill and feeling. Next came a military concerto, then grand rondo by Grisi. I shall not, however, go through all the parts of the concert, but I shall mention what I think of the different performers, beginning with the female singers after Miss Novello. Grisi is considered the finest opera singer in England. Her voice is exceedingly fine. I certainly liked it better than any other I heard. It is deep and very powerful. The upper notes, Mrs. M. says, are perfect, and her execution is wonderful. She is very handsome and finely formed. Malibran, I think, is next to Grisi in point of excellence. Her voice is deeper, and her lower notes are better than Grisi's, but her upper ones are not so good. Malibran has regular and handsome features, but not altogether a pleasing face. She is very dark, and her hair is jet black. She was encored in A Se Estino. Mrs. Seguin has a good voice, but is very inferior to the others. She sang twice, once in a quartet with Grisi, Lablache, and Rubini, but her voice was quite drowned in Grisi's. The second time she sang a duet with her husband. Lablache has a stupendous and very excellent voice. I was quite astonished to hear it. He is an immense man, elderly with a large quantity of grey hair. He has a good-tempered brown face and two bright black eyes. Rubini's voice is very much less powerful, but I think equally good as far as I can judge, not understanding music. Perry is quite young and inexperienced, but has a very sweet voice, and promises, it is said, to excel all other performers. I shall only say that I was exceedingly delighted with the concert altogether, more especially as I never before heard anything of the kind. And this, says Mrs. A.M., was a very good one. It lasted till about 5:30. May 28, Thursday. In the afternoon, at about 4 o'clock, we left London to spend a night at Highwood, the residence of Dr. Fitton. Dr. F. called for us at Welbeck Street and brought us to Highwood in his carriage, the Mulkins as well as ourselves. It was very delightful, after being shut up for a week in London, to come into the country, to see trees and flowers and fresh grass, to breathe fresh air, and to hear all my favourite birds singing again. Those that were in the song about Highwood were the blackbird, the thrush, the blackcap, the robin, the wren, the willow wren, the yellow wren, the chaffinch, the greenfinch, the hedge sparrow, the lark, the yellowhammer. 12 only. Highwood is a very pretty place, interesting from having belonged to the celebrated Wilberforce, whose portrait hangs in the dining room. The furniture is as he left it. Dr. F. is a very scientific and agreeable man. He gave us a great deal of curious information about the wonderful discoveries of modern astronomers, particularly Herschel. He was also so kind as to give me what I have long wished for, and have been trying to make myself, an outline map of the world, showing all the physical features of the globe without any names. He gave me also a little book on the geology of Hastings, written by himself. And we will stop there because that takes us to the end of May of 1835. And when we come back for the next entry, we will read June of 1835.